Nothing is more important to a free land and free people than private property rights. It is the bedrock foundation of freedom. And so when government conspires to steal a private citizen's land, we should take that very seriously, because that's exactly what the city of SeaTac has just been convicted of doing or attempting to do. Our friend Todd Herman on our sister station KTTH, he broke this story yesterday and alerted me to it. And it's a story you have to hear. So let me welcome to the show from the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, Glenn Morgan joins us here on Cairo Radio. Hey, Glenn, thanks for coming on with me this afternoon.
Dori, thank you so much for having me.
Tell me about the journey between the Kingan family and the city of SeaTac. This is really an amazing story that's gotten shockingly little media attention around here.
You know, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is just one of those stories, and I think this happens more often than we'd like to admit. But this is a story about, you know, a family that they bought a piece of property in SeaTac, commercial property. They were going to put a parking garage on it, which makes sense. It's right next to SeaTac. And the central planners at SeaTac, the staff, decided somewhere along the way that they didn't want the Kingans to build this structure, but they kept it secret from them, and instead decided to sabotage the Kingans' ability to develop that property until they could put them in enough financial distress that the city of SeaTac could secretly acquire the property using a straw buyer and threaten them, you know, with default, and then take it themselves for their own plans.
Okay, and the Kingan family, just so people know, a lot of credibility around here. They were part of the Red Robin chain, some other businesses that people would know about. These aren't some nobodies who bought this piece of property, although it wouldn't matter who it was buying it. But this is a family with a lot of business chops and credibility.
Yeah, people who have personally brought hundreds and hundreds of jobs to people for, you know, couple generations now in the Seattle area. And you know, we're fortunate that, and really in this case, we're fortunate that they had the resources and the fortitude to fight back against SeaTac, because this is more than just a lawsuit. This was a jury verdict. This was a jury of their peers reviewing this case who handed down a real damning verdict against the city of SeaTac. And the judge on last Friday, finished, when you add in attorney's fees, it was $18.3 million jury verdict against the city of SeaTac for stealing the property from the Kingans and really using a lot of dishonest activity to prevent them from developing it, and so that SeaTac could get it for themselves.
Okay, so before we get to that judge's verdict and the massive damages, take me a bit more through the journey. So what year did the Kingans acquire this property?
You know, they started trying to do something on this property in 2004. And what the city did is, and so they're applying for permits, and as you know, it takes some time to get through some of that process. And they started applying for the permits to get it built, which it was zoned for, which it had been set up for. It's right across the street from where the light rail station is today, although that didn't exist at the time. Real logical place to put a parking garage, 1,200 stall parking garage near SeaTac. So they start down that road. Then, at first, SeaTac was working with them, and somewhere along the way, the SeaTac staff and possibly some elected officials decided to align themselves with a different parking garage operator who they decided they didn't want competitors to that other parking garage operator to be in the area. So they decided that they would start running the Kingans through the bureaucratic morass where they would make them go down one road and then change their mind, and make them go down another road and change their mind, and pass a moratorium to stop them, and do all kinds of stuff. But to their face, to the Kingans' face, they would always tell them, oh, just one more hurdle you have to go through.
So they just kept taking them down this path, thinking that the resolution was going to be the Kingans would be able to develop the garage as they intended.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, but meanwhile, evidence from the records request, and the city of SeaTac destroyed and hid a lot of records. Most of these records, the city, after the fact, the Kingans had to get from other sources because the staff was hiding it from them, which the judge also brought out. But as it turns out, the staff were secretly trying to sabotage them because they knew what the financial situation was for the Kingans on this property, and what they wanted to do was to threaten them and push them into the corner by using a straw buyer to buy their debt and then threaten them so that then the city of SeaTac could come in and get the property for a song.
And so, Glenn, was the city of SeaTac doing this to protect this other parking lot developer that had them in their pocket, or did the city itself have some ulterior plans for that property?
It appears to be both. According to the findings of fact in the court case, there were elements of both. One was an alignment with a different parking garage operator, so they were colluding with another vendor in the area. And the other one is these planners had their own kind of designs on this property, and the city of SeaTac wanted to acquire it for themselves.
How much were the Kingans into this for?
Well, the initial damages in the case were $12 million. The jury directly awarded them $9 million in damages. Plus, they spent another $2.5 million on legal fees trying to figure out what was going on. And the property was valued at the time at over almost $20 million.
Okay, here's Judge McDermott on Friday handing down this verdict.
There is no mistake on the part of the defendants or the plaintiff that the city engaged in a pattern of deception that lasted years. And because of that, the Kingans' damages are not just limited to losing the property. Kingans' damages span a number of years.
Okay, so not just the value, but also the time. This is so amazing to me, and yet, as you said at the beginning, Glenn, I fear that this happens all the time.
I do too, and that's my concern, Dori, is that how many people are there out there that this has happened to, and their dreams have been crushed and destroyed by bureaucrats and people just like this, city of SeaTac and probably other places, and that there's no way they would have the resources or the fortitude to be able to fight back and dig through all the records and acquire the records after the city had been hiding them. I mean, I really feel like we owe the Kingans our thanks just for fighting it out so long. And boy, just all the stuff the city and the staff was trying to do to them in this whole process.
Well, and I want people to hear, because Judge McDermott was unequivocal in how scathing he was toward the city of SeaTac here.
Quite frankly, the actions of the city of SeaTac in this case are unexplainable and totally unacceptable. The period of deception even lasted through their answer in the public records for their public records for disclosure. And so the plaintiff had to go about getting those records and had to spend more time and effort and money to get those records than they ever should have had to. Why? Well, the city obviously had something to hide. So I find, as someone who works for the government, I find this to be the worst thing about this case is the actions of the city and how dishonest they were. And I find that to be completely and totally unacceptable.
So the city of SeaTac hit with an $18.3 million judgment against the city. And as you reported, Glenn, insurance may not even cover this?
That's correct, yeah. And I just in case any of your listeners want to get all the details, I provide every source document that's related to this case, transcripts, judgments, audio files, everything, on wethegovern.com. I wrote an article about it. That's what you're reading from there. Yep. It's my own blog site where I report on these kind of things. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, this is amazing, because the other part of this was the insurance company is saying, listen, we aren't going to cover this case because fraud appears to have happened. And that's basically what the judge was saying when he recommended, for the first time in his history, sanctions against the attorneys of SeaTac for being dishonest and corrupt and doing illegal things in this case.
And are the people who were in power throughout this process, are they still in power in the city of SeaTac?
No, it was interesting. Some of the bureaucrats are still there. Mary Bartolo is the lead counsel in SeaTac, and she was actually sitting in the courtroom on Friday, and so she's still involved and was involved in the whole process, and so were some of the legal staff. The central planners and the managers, they've moved on to, their next victim. They're working in other cities right now. And the 4 of the elected officials last November were booted out of office. The incumbents were booted out of office, even though they outspent their challengers almost 8-1. And the media covered this not at all. I mean, 4 challengers came up and took on the establishment and booted them out of office, and the incumbents lost 60-40, including a city and state legislator, Mia Gregerson, who was mayor at the time.
As I said in introducing you, there is nothing more essential to free people than private property rights. And clearly your organization, the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, obviously you recognize the importance of us protecting our sovereignty from a government that would otherwise run amok over us.
That's right. And I mean, if they're willing to do this to people like the Kingans, how much more likely are they willing to do it to you and I and other people out there that are, much less, we don't have the resources to fight back in the same way. And I fear that this is happening. I know it's happening far more often than it's being covered. And this case is simply an illustration of it that's happened recently here in the city of SeaTac. And the more people that are aware of this, I think the more important it is that we expose this stuff so that we can stop it and prevent it and if we need to make some changes in the legislation to hold some of these people more personally accountable, I think that's what we should do.
Did the Kingans get the property back, or did they end up selling to that straw buyer the city had?
No, they ended up having to sign it over to SeaTac. SeaTac owns that property right now.
And what is SeaTac doing with it?
Nothing. It's in the same. Basically, they're doing the same thing they had there before. They went through all this effort to get a piece of property that they're not at this point in time doing anything with. It's just people are parking there, and there's a couple little businesses there, but nothing that's changed. The same. I mean, this is.
Yeah, amazing.
And the bad thing about this is it's the taxpayers, it's the citizens who live in SeaTac that are going to pay the price for this. In addition to abusing the Kingans, these bureaucrats and some of the elected officials, they get away with this, and the only people left holding the bag at the end of the day are the citizens of the taxpayers of SeaTac who had nothing to do with this decision. It's
an amazing story. Glenn Morgan with the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, and he has a great post of this on his blog, wethegoverned.com. Glenn, great coverage of this, and appreciate all the work you do on behalf of property rights.
Dori, thank you so much for letting your listeners know.
Absolutely. It's a story that needed to get out there. All right, Glenn, thank you. And again, thanks to Todd Herman on KTTH who broke that story and tipped us off on it. You got to watch out, man. If they have a financial interest to destroy you, government will do that in a heartbeat. All right, we got lots more to come as the Dori Monson Show rolls on. Don't go anywhere. Monson Show rolls on. Don't go anywhere.